Brave New World, Chapter 12. Bernard had to shout through the locked door. The savage would not open. But everybody's there, waiting for you. Let them wait, came back the muffled voice through the door. But you know quite well, John, how difficult it is to sound persuasive at the top of one's voice. I asked them on purpose to meet you. You ought to have asked me first whether I wanted to meet them. But you always came before, John. That's precisely why I don't want to come again. Just to please me? Bernard bellowingly wheedled. Won't you come to please me? No. Do you seriously mean it? Yes. Despairingly. But what shall I do? Bernard wailed. Go to hell, bawled the exasperated voice from within. But the arch community songster of Canterbury is there tonight. Bernard was almost in tears. Aye, ya, taikwa. It was only in Zuni that the savage could adequately express what he felt about the arch community songster. Anai, he added as an afterthought, and then, with derisive ferocity, Sons aso say not, and he spat on the ground as Pope might have done. In the end, Bernard had to slink back, diminished, to his rooms and inform the impatient assembly that the savage would not be appearing that evening. The news was received with indignation. The men were furious at having been tricked into behaving politely to this insignificant fellow with the unsavory reputation and the heretical opinions. The higher their positions in the hierarchy, the deeper their resentment. To play such a joke on me, the arch songster kept repeating, on me. As for the women, they indignantly felt that they had been had on false pretenses, had by a wretched little man who had alcohol poured into his bottle by mistake, by a creature with a gamma minus physique. It was an outrage, and they said so more and more loudly. The head mistress of Eton was particularly scathing. Lenina alone said nothing. Pale, her blue eyes clouded with an unwonted melancholy, she sat in a corner, cut off from those who surrounded her by an emotion which they did not share. She had come to the party filled with a strange feeling of anxious exultation. In a few minutes, she had said to herself as she entered the room, I shall be seeing him, talking to him, telling him, for she had come with her mind made up, that I like him more than anybody I've ever known. And then perhaps he'll say, what would he say? The blood had rushed to her cheeks. Why was he so strange the other night? After the feeling, so queer, and yet I'm absolutely sure he really does rather like me. I'm sure. It was at that moment that Bernard had made his announcement. The savage wasn't coming to the party. Lenina suddenly felt all the sensations normally experienced at the beginning of a violent passion surrogate treatment, a sense of dreadful emptiness, a breathless apprehension, a nausea. Her heart seemed to stop beating. Perhaps it's because he doesn't like me, she said to herself, and at once this possibility became an established certainty. John had refused to come because he didn't like her. He didn't like her. It really is a bit too thick, the headmistress of Eton was saying to the director of crematory and phosphorus reclamation, when I think that I actually. Yes, came the voice of Fanny Crown. It's absolutely true about the alcohol. Someone I know knew someone who was working at the embryo source store at the time. She said to my friend, and my friend said to me, too bad, said Henry Foster, sympathizing with the arch community songster. It may interest you to know that our ex director was on the point of transferring him to Iceland. Pierced by every word that was spoken, the tight balloon of Bernard's happy self confidence was leaking from 1,000 wounds. Pale, distraught, abject, and agitated, he moved among his guests, stammering incoherent apologies, assuring them that next time the savage would certainly be there, begging them to sit down and take a carotene sandwich, a slice of vitamin A pate, a glass of champagne surrogate. They duly ate, but ignored him, drank, and were either rude to his face or talked to one another about him loudly and offensively, as though he had not been there. And now, my friends, said the arch community songster of Canterbury, in that beautiful ringing voice with which he led the proceedings at Ford's Day celebrations, now, my friends, I think perhaps the time has come. He rose, put down his glass, brushed from his purple viscous waistcoat the crumbs of a considerable collation, and walked towards the door. Bernard darted forward to intercept him. Must you really, arch songster? It's very early still. I'd hoped you would. Yes, what hadn't he hoped when Lenina confidentially told him that the arch community songster would accept an invitation if it were sent? He's really rather sweet, you know. And she had shown Bernard the little golden zipper fastening in the form of a T which the arch songster had given her as a memento of the weekend she had spent at Lambeth to meet the arch community songster of Canterbury and Mr. Savage. Bernard had proclaimed his triumph on every invitation card, but the savage had chosen this evening of all evenings to lock himself up in his room, to shout "Honey!" and even it was lucky that Bernard didn't understand Zuni. Sans, eso, say, nuit, which should have been the crowning moment of Bernard's whole career, had turned out to be the moment of his greatest humiliation. I'd so much hoped, he stammeringly repeated, looking up at the great dignitary with pleading and distracted eyes. My young friend, said the arch community songster in a tone of loud and solemn severity. There was a general silence. Let me give you a word of advice. He wagged his finger at Bernard. Before it's too late. A word of good advice. His voice became sepulchral. Sep- sepulchral. Mend your ways, my young friend. Mend your ways. He made the sign of the T over him and turned away. Lenina, my dear, he called in another tone, come with me. Obediently, but unsmiling, and wholly insensible of the honor done to her, without elation, Lenina walked after him out of the room. The other guests followed at a respectable interval. The last of them slammed the door. Bernard was all alone. Punctured, utterly deflated, he dropped into a chair and, covering his face with his hands, began to weep. A few minutes later, however, he thought better of it and took 4 tablets of soma.